Nia had always known a life of simplicity. Born and raised in the heart of a vibrant African village, she was known for her kindness and unwavering dedication to her family and community. The village, nestled between rolling green hills and a mighty river, thrived on tradition. Elders passed down stories of ancestors, harvests were celebrated with music and dance, and the people believed in the wisdom of the spirits. Nia often dreamed of love, though she never expected anything grand. Like her mother and grandmother before her, she assumed her fate was to marry a hard-working man from the village, tend to their home, and raise children who would carry on their legacy. She had no complaints, she found beauty in the simple joys of life. One day a stranger arrived in the village. His name was Jahi. He was quiet yet observant, strong yet gentle. His hands were calloused from labor, and his eyes carried the weight of untold stories. Unlike most men in the village who had known each other since childhood, no one could quite place where Jahi had come from. The villagers murmured among themselves, wondering about his origins. But Jahi was respectful and hard-working. He assisted the elders without being asked, helped repair homes after a storm, and even taught the children how to carve wooden animals from tree bark. He spoke little of his past, yet his actions earned him admiration. When Jahi expressed his desire to find a wife, Nia's family saw it as a sign of good fortune. A strong, capable man seeking to build a home was a blessing, and they believed Nia would be well cared for. Though Nia had reservations, something about Jahi felt different. She trusted her family's wisdom. The wedding was arranged swiftly. Women in the village prepared bright-colored fabrics, weaving patterns symbolizing prosperity and happiness. Drummers rehearsed rhythms that would echo through the night during the celebration. Nia, dressed in her finest beaded jewelry, tried to quiet the strange feeling in her heart. Jahi, though kind and dutiful, still remained an enigma. As Nia prepared to step into this new chapter of her life, she couldn't shake the sense that she was about to uncover something far beyond what she had ever imagined. The entire village was alive with excitement. Weddings were more than just a union between two people, they were a celebration of community, tradition, and the continuation of life. The village square was decorated with vibrant fabrics and woven garlands, while the rhythmic beating of drums set the tone for the joyous occasion. Women dressed in bright colors sang traditional songs, their voices blending in harmony with the laughter of children. Elders gathered under the great baobab tree, sharing stories of past unions and offering blessings for the couple's future. Nia, adorned in an intricately beaded necklace passed down from her grandmother, felt a mix of emotions. The weight of marriage settled on her shoulders, bringing with it both excitement and uncertainty. Jahi, standing tall beside her, remained calm and composed. Though he was kind and respectful, there was something unreadable in his gaze, something distant, as if he carried burdens unseen by others. As the ceremony began, the village griot, the storyteller and keeper of traditions, recited blessings, invoking the spirits of the ancestors to watch over their marriage. Elders placed their hands upon the couple's heads, wishing them prosperity and many children. The people danced, their feet pounding against the earth in rhythmic unison, celebrating the union of two souls. Feasting followed, with large pots of spiced stew, roasted meat, and fresh fruits being shared among the guests. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense and the warmth of flickering lanterns. Nia smiled at the sight of her loved ones enjoying themselves, but deep inside she couldn't shake the curiosity growing within her. Who exactly was the man she had married? As they settled into their new life, Jahi proved to be a hard-working and devoted husband. He woke before dawn to tend the fields, ensuring their crops grew strong. He reinforced their home with sturdy wood and stone, making it stronger than any other hut in the village. Nia admired his dedication, and despite her initial doubts, she felt herself growing comfortable in their routine. Yet Jahi remained a mystery. He never spoke of his past, and whenever she asked, he skillfully changed the subject. He was knowledgeable about things no ordinary farmer should know. He could track animals like a seasoned hunter, he spoke different dialects fluently, and he crafted weapons with the precision of a warrior. His reflexes were unnaturally fast, his strength unmatched even by the strongest men in the village. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Nia finally gathered the courage to question him. "Jahi, where did you learn to fight like that?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. He looked at her for a long moment before shaking his head. "Some things are better left in the past, Nia. Do not ask me again." His tone was not harsh, but it carried finality. Nia's curiosity only deepened. She had married a humble farmer, or so she thought. But the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he avoided his past, Everything about him hinted at something greater, something hidden. And she was determined to uncover the truth. The days passed and life in the village continued as usual. Nia and Jahi's marriage settled into a comfortable rhythm. She would weave baskets and prepare food while he tended the land. Yet, despite his hard-working nature and kindness, an air of mystery always lingered around him. It wasn't just Nia who noticed. One afternoon, while fetching water from the river, she overheard two elder women whispering under the shade of a tree. "Did you see how he lifted that fallen tree trunk like it was nothing?" one muttered. "The strength of 10 men, I tell you," the other replied, shaking her head. "No ordinary farmer moves like that. He doesn't belong here." Nia's heart pounded. The elders were the wisest in the village. If they found Jahi's presence unusual, perhaps there was truth to her own suspicions. Later that night, she decided to observe him closely. Jahi had always been secretive about his evening routines, often claiming he needed to check on the livestock or tend to the crops. But that night, Nia followed him quietly, stepping lightly on the dirt path to avoid making a sound. She hid behind a thick cluster of banana trees and watched. Under the pale glow of the moon, Jahi removed his shirt and stretched his arms, his muscles rippling in the dim light. Then, with swift, precise movements, he began what looked like an intricate combat routine. His hands moved in sharp, controlled motions, striking the air with an invisible force. He leapt into the air, twisting mid-flight before landing effortlessly on his feet. He wielded a wooden staff with the precision of a seasoned warrior, striking at unseen enemies with incredible speed. Nia covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. No farmer, no matter how strong, moved like that. The agility, the discipline, the sheer power, it was something else entirely. She was so entranced that she almost missed the sound of hushed voices nearby. Her breath caught as she saw 3 shadowy figures approaching Jahi. They emerged from the darkness, their forms hidden beneath long cloaks. Their voices were low, urgent, and though she could not hear every word, fragments reached her ears. "Waiting for the right time? The kingdom still watches. Your duty, your highness." Nia's blood ran cold. Her husband, her simple, quiet husband, was being addressed as Your Highness. Who was he? The conversation ended quickly, and the visitors disappeared as swiftly as they had come. Jahi stood in silence for a moment before turning toward their home. Nia rushed back, heart hammering, slipping under the covers just before he entered their hut. He lay down beside her, his breathing steady, but Nia could sense the tension in his body. She turned slightly, watching him from the corner of her eye. "Who were those men, Jahi?" she asked softly. His body stiffened, but he did not turn to face her. "No one you need to worry about," he said simply. "But they called you." "Nia." His voice was gentle but firm. "Some truths are better left unknown." Silence fell between them, thick and unyielding. Nia knew one thing for certain: she had not married an ordinary man. And she was determined to uncover the truth. The night was calm, the village wrapped in peaceful slumber beneath a sky full of stars. The faint crackling of torches and the occasional hoot of an owl were the only sounds disturbing the stillness. Nia lay beside Jahi, her mind restless with questions. Ever since she had overheard the mysterious men calling him Your Highness, her suspicions had only grown stronger. Who was he really? And what was he hiding? Then, without warning, the night was shattered by screams. A thunderous crash echoed through the village as huts burst into flames. Shadows moved swiftly between the houses, masked warriors armed with swords and spears storming through the narrow pathways. Nia bolted upright, her breath catching in terror. Jahi was already awake, his body tense as he listened intently. "They found me," he whispered. Before she could ask what he meant, the door of their hut was kicked open. A towering figure stood in the entrance, dressed in dark robes, his face hidden behind a carved wooden mask. His voice was deep, menacing. "The lost heir," he growled. "You can't hide forever." Before Nia could react, Jahi moved. She had seen him display strength before, lifting heavy loads, working tirelessly in the fields, but this was something else entirely. He was a blur moving with inhuman speed. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the intruder and struck him across the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. More warriors poured in, their blades flashing in the dim firelight. Jahi fought them all, his movements precise and deadly. He twisted, dodged, and struck with such skill that it left Nia breathless. The village awakened to chaos. Men rushed out with farming tools to defend their families, but they were no match for the trained invaders. Screams filled the air as huts burned, smoke rising into the night sky. And yet, despite being outnumbered, Jahi fought as though he were an army of his own. Nia watched in awe as he took down man after man, moving faster than her eyes could follow. When one attacker lunged at him with a spear, Jahi caught it midair and snapped it like a twig. When another swung a sword, Jahi dodged with effortless grace, knocking the warrior unconscious with a single blow. The remaining invaders hesitated, their confidence wavering. One of them, still clutching his wounded arm, stumbled backward. "It's him," he whispered in horror. "The lost heir." The words hung in the air like a curse. The warriors exchanged nervous glances before making a hasty retreat, disappearing into the night. The village was left in ruins, but the threat had passed. Silence followed. All eyes turned to Jahi. The villagers who had known him as a humble farmer, now stared at him in shock. No ordinary man could do what he had just done. Nia stepped forward, her heart pounding. "What did they mean?" she asked. "Who are you?" Jahi's face, glistening with sweat, was unreadable. For the first time since she had known him, he looked afraid. He met her gaze, his voice quiet but firm. "There is no hiding anymore," he said. "It's time you knew the truth." The village still smoldered from the night's attack, the air thick with the scent of smoke and charred wood. Villagers moved cautiously, tending to the wounded and salvaging what remained of their homes. But their eyes kept darting toward Jahi, their quiet farmer who had just fought off trained warriors like a seasoned warlord. Nia stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had asked him who he was, and now she saw the hesitation in his eyes. The weight of a truth he had carried for too long pressed down on him. Jahi exhaled deeply, then finally spoke. "I was not always Jahi," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "I was once Prince Jabari, the rightful heir to the kingdom of Marunga." A stunned silence settled over the village. The name sent a ripple of shock through the elders, their expressions shifting from confusion to recognition. "The lost prince?" one of them murmured in disbelief. Nia's breath caught. "Prince Jabari?" The stories of Marunga's fallen royal family had been whispered for years, but she had never imagined that the man she married, the man she had loved as a simple farmer, was the very prince believed to have been killed. "Jahi, no Jabari," continued, his gaze locked on hers. "My father, King Omari, ruled Marunga with wisdom. But my uncle, General Asim, hungered for the throne. He staged a coup, assassinating my parents and framing me for their deaths. I was barely a man when I was forced to flee, hunted like an animal by my own people." Nia struggled to process his words. She had seen his strength, his discipline, his intelligence, signs of someone trained far beyond a farmer's life. And now it all made sense. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Jahi's expression softened. "Because I never wanted this life again. I never wanted to put you in danger." He turned to the villagers, his voice growing firmer. 4 years I wandered, staying one step ahead of my uncle's assassins. I hid among strangers, learning to survive in the shadows. When I came here, I thought I had finally found peace. A life away from the bloodshed, the betrayals. I wanted to be just a man, not a prince. Nia's mind reeled. She had married a man thinking he was just like the others in the village, humble, hardworking, and content with a simple life. But in reality she had unknowingly become the wife of a hidden king. Her legs felt weak, but she stood tall. "And now?" she asked. "Now that they know where you are?" Jahi's jaw tightened. "Now I can no longer run." He looked at the villagers, at the people who had taken him in without question. "My uncle will send more men. He will not rest until I am dead." A deep silence filled the air. The village, once a place of peace, was now a battleground in a war they never asked for. Nia swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her chest. She had fallen in love with Jahi, the quiet, hard-working man. But she was also standing before Jabari, a prince whose past had come to claim him. And now, whether she liked it or not, her fate was bound to his. She met his gaze with newfound resolve. "Then we fight," she said. Jahi's eyes widened, surprise flickering across his face. "You've been running for too long," Nia continued. "You say you wanted a simple life, but that life is gone now. Your people need you. You can't hide anymore." A murmur spread among the villagers. Some nodded, others exchanged uncertain glances. But Nia saw something change in Jahi's eyes. The weary man who had sought refuge here now stood taller, as though he were remembering who he truly was. Jahi let out a slow breath, then nodded. "If I am to reclaim what was stolen from me," he said, "I will need help." Nia reached for his hand, her grip firm. "You have me." A fire ignited in his eyes, the look of a man ready to face his destiny. The hidden prince had been found. Now it was time to reclaim his throne. The moon cast long shadows over the quiet village as Jahi and Nia prepared to leave. The people who had once welcomed them with open arms now feared the inevitable wrath of the enemy. There was no time to waste. If they stayed, the village would suffer. With a final glance at the home they had built together, Jahi tightened his grip on Nia's hand. "We must go." They fled into the night, moving swiftly through the dense forest. Every rustling leaf, every distant howl sent a fresh wave of tension through them. The enemy would return, and next time they wouldn't come just to threaten, they would come to destroy. A search for allies. Jahi led the way, his steps sure and purposeful. He knew where they had to go, the hidden camps where his father's most loyal warriors had once taken refuge. If any still remained, they would be the key to reclaiming his throne. Nia watched him carefully as they traveled. This was not the quiet, reserved farmer she had married. This was a prince stepping back into his rightful role. His shoulders bore the weight of a kingdom lost, but his eyes burned with determination. They traveled for days, crossing treacherous rivers and navigating thick jungles. They had little food, even less rest, but neither complained. There was too much at stake. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at an encampment hidden deep in the mountains. Torches flickered in the night, casting eerie shadows on the men who guarded the entrance. Jahi stepped forward, his voice steady. "I am Prince Jabari, son of King Omari. I have returned to reclaim my kingdom." A tense silence followed. The guards exchanged uncertain glances before an older warrior stepped forward. His face was lined with age, his eyes sharp with recognition. "The prince lives," the man whispered in awe before dropping to one knee. One by one the warriors knelt before Jahi. Some wept, others clenched their fists in silent fury. They had believed him dead, another casualty of his uncle's betrayal. But now their prince had returned. Spies and betrayal. As Jahi and Nia gained allies, danger followed closely behind. Not everyone could be trusted. Some men had grown bitter in exile, others had secretly pledged loyalty to the enemy king. One night, Nia overheard whispers outside their tent. She crept closer, heart pounding, and caught the name she dreaded most, General Asim. A traitor was among them. She rushed to Jahi's side, breathless. "Someone is feeding information to the enemy. We are not safe here." Jahi's jaw tightened, his mind racing. They had come too far to fall to treachery now. He called a meeting, his voice sharp with authority. "We march at dawn. We can't wait for them to come to us." The warriors cheered, their faith in him stronger than ever. Nia's bravery. As battle loomed, Nia trained alongside the soldiers. She had once been a simple village woman, but she refused to be left behind. She learned to wield a blade, to read maps, to inspire those who doubted their chances. Jahi watched her with admiration. He had always known she was strong, but now he saw a leader beside him. As the sun rose, they stood side by side, looking toward the kingdom that awaited them. The time had come. No more running. No more hiding. It was time to reclaim the throne. The air was thick with tension. Across the land, whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. Jahi's uncle, King Asim, had ruled with an iron fist, crushing any opposition. Now, with rumors of Jahi's return, he prepared for war. From his palace, he sent out a decree: any who side with the so-called Lost Prince will be branded traitors and executed. Fear took hold of the kingdom. Some were eager to see the rightful heir return, but others dreaded the wrath of King Asim. Villages were divided, neighbors turned against each other. Would Jahi be their savior, or would his return bring only more bloodshed? A deadly betrayal. As Jahi gathered his forces, he knew the battle ahead would not be won by strength alone. He needed strategy. He needed loyalty. But not everyone in his camp could be trusted. One night, under the cover of darkness, an ambush struck. Jahi barely had time to react before arrows rained down upon their encampment. Soldiers fell, chaos erupted, and the enemy seemed to know exactly where to strike. Jahi fought fiercely, his sword a blur of silver in the moonlight. But the attack was too precise, too coordinated. Someone had betrayed them. As the battle raged, Jahi found himself face to face with the traitor, an old friend, a warrior he had trusted. "Why?" Jahi demanded, his voice laced with anger and hurt. The man hesitated. I did what I had to. The enemy king promised me a place at his side." Betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Before Jahi could respond, an enemy soldier lunged at him. The traitor turned away, leaving Jahi to fend for himself. Blood stained the ground as the prince barely dodged the attack. But he survived. And now he knew, There could be no mercy for those who stood against him. The people's doubt. In the aftermath of the ambush, Jahi's forces regrouped, but morale was shaken. Some still doubt you, Nia said, watching him carefully. They fear your uncle's power. Jahi clenched his fists. He had expected resistance, but not this hesitation from his own people. I am their rightful king, he said. I fight for them, not for myself. Nia took his hand. Then show them. Prove to them that you are not just a prince in hiding, you are a leader worth following. Her words gave him strength. He gathered his warriors, his voice ringing through the camp. Our enemy wants us to be afraid. He wants us to kneel. He raised his sword. But we are not afraid. And we will not kneel. The warriors roared in agreement. Their spirits were rekindled. The final battle approaches. As dawn broke, scouts brought word. King Asim's army was on the march. Thousands of soldiers marching toward them, ready to crush any resistance. The time had come. Jahi looked at Nia, his most trusted ally, the woman who had stood beside him through it all. This is it, he said. She nodded. Then let's finish this. With that, they turned toward the battlefield. The fight for the throne had begun. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the vast plains as Jahi and his warriors approached the royal city. The time for hiding was over. The time for reclaiming what was rightfully his had come. The walls of the palace loomed ahead, guarded by King Asim's soldiers. Archers lined the battlements, their arrows glinting in the light. The enemy king had prepared for war. Jahi stood tall, his heart pounding. His army, though smaller in number, was filled with warriors willing to fight and die for their rightful king. Among them were villagers who had suffered under Asim's rule, soldiers who had once served his father, and rebels who had long dreamed of this moment. Nia moved among them, her voice strong and unwavering. We fight not just for Jahi but for our future. For our children, for our homes, for the freedom stolen from us. No more fear. No more suffering. Today we take back what is ours. Her words sent a wave of determination through the crowd. With a single nod from Jahi, the battle began. A kingdom in flames. The first wave of warriors stormed the palace gates. Arrows rained down, but Jahi's soldiers pushed forward, using shields to protect themselves. The sound of metal clashing against metal filled the air as swords met in furious combat. Jahi fought with the skill of a man who had trained his whole life for this moment. His movements were swift, his blade cutting through enemy lines. He had come too far to fail now. Nia fought alongside the villagers, using her wits and courage to guide them. She had never been a warrior, but she had the heart of one. She led a group of rebels through a secret passage, a hidden tunnel she had learned about from an elder. They would attack from within, weakening the enemy's defenses. As the battle raged, the people of the city began to rise up. Inspired by Jahi's return, they turned against the soldiers of King Asim. What had started as a war between armies had become a full-scale rebellion. The streets of the palace were in chaos. Victory was within reach. The final confrontation. Jahi pushed through the battlefield, cutting down the last of the palace guards standing in his way. He had only one goal now, his uncle. King Asim stood at the top of the throne room steps, his sword drawn. He had once been a man of power, but now there was fear in his eyes. You should have stayed in hiding, boy, Asim sneered. You were never meant to rule. Jahi tightened his grip on his sword. This kingdom was never yours to take. They circled each other, the tension thick between them. Then with a fierce cry they clashed. The battle between uncle and nephew was brutal. Asim was older, but he was still a dangerous warrior. His strikes were heavy, each one aimed to kill. But Jahi was faster, stronger. Fueled by the years of injustice, by the people who had suffered. A deep slash cut across Jahi's arm, but he did not falter. With one final strike, Jahi knocked the sword from his uncle's hands. Asim stumbled, falling to his knees. Please, the defeated king gasped. Have mercy. Jahi stared at him, breathing heavily. Did you show mercy to my father? To the people you betrayed? Asim had no answer. With the weight of justice behind him, Jahi ended the tyrant's reign. A kingdom set free. Asim's fall signaled the end. His remaining soldiers threw down their weapons, surrendering to the rightful king. The palace doors were thrown open and the people poured in. Cheers erupted as Jahi stepped forward, victorious. Nia reached his side, her eyes filled with pride. It's over, she whispered. Jahi looked out at his people, at the kingdom that was now his once more. He had fought for this, bled for this, and now he would rebuild. The battle had been won. But the journey was just beginning. Let me know when you're ready for the final part. Smiling face with smiling eyes. You said. 9. A new era begins, 500 words. Jahi is crowned king with Nia as his queen. The kingdom celebrates but challenges remain. He must restore trust and peace. Nia, once a simple village girl, now stands beside him as a wise and strong queen. She reflects on how fate changed her life in ways she never imagined. Their story becomes legend, told for generations. ChatGPT said. A new era begins, 500 words. The grand halls of the palace, once filled with the echoes of tyranny, now resonated with the joyous cheers of the people. Jahi, the lost prince who had returned, stood before them, no longer in the shadows. Dressed in the royal robes of his ancestors, he looked upon the gathered crowd, farmers, merchants, warriors and elders, all waiting for the moment they had long dreamed of. The coronation was unlike any other. It was not just the crowning of a king but the rebirth of a kingdom. As the high priest placed the golden crown upon Jahi's head, a wave of emotion surged through him. For years he had hidden his true identity, living as a simple man. Now he was stepping into the destiny he had once feared. The people roared in approval. Drums pounded, voices lifted in song, and the palace gates opened wide for all to celebrate. By Jahi's side stood Nia, his queen, the woman who had changed his life as much as he had changed hers. A queen unlike any other. Nia had never dreamed of such a life. She had once been just a village girl, tending to the fields and living by the traditions of her ancestors. But fate had chosen her for something greater. She was no longer just the wife of a farmer. She was a queen, a leader, and a voice of wisdom for the people. Though she had never sought power, she embraced it with grace. She did not wear jewels for vanity but for the strength they symbolized. She did not sit on a throne for luxury but to stand beside her husband in shaping a new future. The people adored her. She was one of them, born in the village, raised in the ways of simplicity. They saw in her a ruler who would never forget the hardships of the common folk. Rebuilding the kingdom. The celebrations lasted for days, but Jahi knew that true victory lay not in battle but in peace. The kingdom had suffered under years of corruption. Trust had been broken, families torn apart. Now Jahi and Nia had the task of healing their land. Jahi vowed to rule with justice, wisdom, and compassion, qualities he had learned not in the palace, but in the humble fields of the village. He met with elders, warriors, and even former enemies, seeking ways to unite the people once more. Nia too played her part. She introduced new systems to help the poor, ensuring that no child would go hungry, no family would suffer needlessly. The kingdom did not just have a king, it had a queen who fought just as fiercely for its future. A story for generations. As years passed, their tale became legend. The story of the humble farmer who was really a lost prince. The village girl who became a queen. The love that changed a kingdom. Elders told it to their grandchildren, passing it down through the ages. And so, Jahi and Nia's names lived on, not just as rulers but as symbols of courage, destiny, and the power of love.